My name is Robin Imthorn. I'm still a sergeant at the Marine Corps, and what you see in the picture is 5-5 out. What it actually means is I understand you perfectly well, and what it is, and how I thought about it, and how I came to do this. The picture says a lot, but I will show you in the next couple of slides, and you will understand what 5-5 out means. It's about I thought by myself. I did a lot of tours for the Marines, went all over the world, but I never thought it would that I will experience it in this way when I came home. And what I mean is that what you see in the video. Was like every single time it brought me back to war. And I didn't notice it at first. First, I was just like, I came back for tours, and you come back to safely in the Netherlands, and you just roll back in your work, and you got your girlfriend at the time, and you just do what you normally do. But along the way, it just didn't went the way I wanted. I got emotionally detached. I could explode in rage, and till the point that I just couldn't cope with my mind anymore. And the picture is from 2019. There I'm picked up from the highway because I'm standing next to my car and I don't know where I am anymore. Physically, I'm okay, but mentally, I'm totally broken at that point. In 2021, I ran 5 marathons in 5 consecutive days. My mental health was questioned also that in that time, but for a different reason. That was because I wanted to give voice about what was happening in 2019, because we didn't talk about it in our Marine Corps. It wasn't natural to talk about things that you looked at as weak that time. 2022, I ran a world record with a backpack of 45 kilograms in 5 hours, to also show that there's strength in when you get back mentally, when you can pick yourself up, you can grow, and you can do something that's bigger than yourself, and to give to show the weight that some of us carry around, and the weight is that backpack, and it's most of the time it's invisible. You don't see it unless you talk about it, and usually when you talk to someone who has already been there where you have been, and who's been on a tour or been in the military, you talk the same talk. But most of us carry it around, and it's invisible, but you get it's kind of heavy to walk around with it. But when I grew up as a young kid, I was searching for something in my life, and I was good in breaking stuff from other people. They have a job for that, so I went to the military, but I could also have been in jail. So there was a two-way which I was going, and luckily for me it was the military. I grew up in a family with a little brother and a bigger brother, but my father wasn't home, emotionally not attached to me, so I was looking for something another father figure. And I came to the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps in the Netherlands is the hardest corps you can do. So it's the hardest basic training you can follow. These are the hardest men. That's how we talk about ourselves in that way. I did a lot of tours. I went all over the world, and it's also the saying that we have, Quapet et Orbis. It means all around the world, and we went everywhere. This is some of my missions that I did in Macedonia, Afghanistan, and some in Somali for the coast. But I lived my life, and here I'm 20 years old. I really lived a dream at that time. And For the sake of that, I will zoom in now because due to the time on one mission, and that's Uruzgan, Afghanistan. And this was a mission. There was always something going on. We had a lot of IDs, mine threats, rockets shooting at us. We fired. It was always we did a 6 month rotation, and we're always busy. And in the rotation, we also got hit a couple of times. And the first occasion, I put a video how we walk around there, and to give you an image, the area that we are walking in.
telefoon Durbin? We zijn goed bezig, Kuilen.
Hey, no más solo aquí.
Nereyim şu anda?
M16 neresiyle kombatacağız?
Nereyim şu anda? Senin adamın şu anda emoşum olsun.
Şu anda sim.
Well, you see us walking, it's pretty relaxed, but that could change in just a couple of moments, and the areas really could change in a hostile area just in moments. On one place you could have kids playing, and the other, the kids could be gone. Everything went silent, and something was going on. During an operation, the tours were around 6 months, like I told, and during an operation where we are 2 or 3 weeks in the field, we got hit one time, and our sergeant got injured, and we put him on the helicopter, and he was brought back. And it was in a couple of days, a lot of stuff happened. The third day, I was asked to make sure the Viking that you see here, some are riding around in Ukraine, I saw. So it's not fun to see, but it's interesting to see. But we always said, right, stay in the right track, stay behind each other, because that limits the probability that you will drive over a mine or stuff. And my task at that moment is to guide the vehicle in the right track. And while I'm guiding the vehicle in the right track, a jeep from us is riding at the same position we just left, and when it rides around it, and it's like suddenly it's a hit. The vehicle goes up in the air. There's dust of smoke. I can still feel the pressure of being put back, and only thing I can think of, everybody should be dead at that moment, because the vehicle is thrown a couple of meters away. Everything is going on, and I can't see bodies right away, but I have a choice to make in that moment. And the choice that I make in that moment is to go run back to where the vehicle was. And when I approached it, I saw 2 wounded, one heavily wounded, and that's the first time we in my life that I see something like that. There's someone screaming. It's chaos. It looks like the running over there. When I think back on it, it's like walking in a sort of slow motion state over there, and not really understanding what I see, but I have to react. And emotions in that moment don't have a place, because you have to act, you have to do stuff, you have to save a life, and every choice that you make in that moment saves a life, or you could die under your hands. We were able to save a life, but the impact was heavy. We're really in the beginning of our tour. And this is what I looked upon when I came there. And the bodies over there, of course, were not really next to the vehicle, but you can see the damage, and you can see how lucky some of the guys were who survived that hit. But it does something to you, and that's not the moment to think about it, because you're still in action. It's not because we got hit and now we can go home. It's because you're still in enemy territory, and you're weak at that moment, you're exposed. So you don't have time to really feel those emotions. You have to do a task. And if you don't do the task, people will die or people will get hurt. And along the tour, you will keep doing that task, but not really feeling those emotions that come up. And I will make a big leap now. This is my wife, Vrouwtje. And when I came home, I still was in that same mode about not speaking about my emotions and not talking about it, but I was feeling rather okay. But in the years that passed, I was feeling a little bit worse, and not just in one bit, but just a little bit worse. And my wife also recognized from what's going on with him. I just don't know what it is, and he distances himself from me. He doesn't talk to me. He's emotionally detached, and he can just could explode in rage and stuff like that. But really, in the years, really slowly, not right back at the tour. Of course, I had to get used to civilian life for a bit, but it was really slowly the things got worse. Um, and eventually, my the most beautiful thing in the world happens. My daughter is born. But for me, it's the worst thing because in the Holland we have a saying: you have a bucket of water, and what something happens in your life, you keep pouring water, and if you don't empty the bucket, it will overflow at some point. And this is for me the point that it overflows. My daughter is born, and I can't cope with it. First 2 weeks, it's all fun and games, but after that, when she starts crying, I can't hear to the sound. I just shut down. Um, I can't help myself. I can't be here for my wife. I just detach. I start working more, but at work, it's everything's just going wrong. And for me, it reaches the point of no return. It reaches the point that living is even in doubt at some point. And all because I didn't talk about it. I just kept it for myself for years, for years, for years. Of course, I shared with my buddies, and when I have something to drink, we talked about the war, but we didn't talk about how we feel, and I didn't talk about when I had a panic attack or hyperventilation or not feeling okay. I just wanted to be strong, and all hid it behind a mask. So you see a photo of a lovely child with his father, but behind that, there's something worse. A bottle could fall on the ground, and I just could explode in rage. And to give you a clear image about not returning home, that's the thing I think is the most difficult. To not be in the moment and always still be in the war, and not to just you cannot return, and that's something they had to learn. Of course, that's why I'm talking now. But this video really says a lot about it.
Because for today, we begin writing a new story. Not a story of deep trauma, a story of strength. Story of being you again. Make that choice. Transform the struggles of your past into the strengths of your future.
Really is a clear example about how it feels to not be present in the moment and missing life. Life just goes past you, and you're always still in the war. You cannot switch off. I was switching on, and of course, I did my therapy. I did my EMDR exposure therapy at a point because I wasn't able to cope with life anymore. Did all these things, but something was missing during that therapy, and it was we call it our green family, our army family, our marine family, and I was missing that because I was going through the struggle alone. Um, and that loneliness is really what made it a lot worse. It was killing me because I couldn't talk about it because I was ashamed. In the military culture, there's a lot of shame about talking about how you feel and stuff like that, and that worsened for me. So I started something when I got better, and I called it 5 out. I started on Instagram, and I thought, all right, I'm gonna run 5 marathons in 5 consecutive days to give a voice to that. And I started sharing stories, just my personal stories, and about fear, about anxiety, about how it felt, about a panic attack, and people, military vets, veterans came to my account, and they saw themselves in my stories. And there was one, it was two, it was 100, it became hundreds, around 1,000 at some point. I was talking to guys that needed help, but uh, didn't make the step to search help because they avoided the pain they were struggling with. And I started coming back to the military. I was feeling better and started talking to young cadets about just being vulnerable, not being weak. There's a difference between weak and vulnerable, but being vulnerable, just being taking ownership about how you feel, not being perfect, and that you have things in your life that you need to talk about or need to do something about, because otherwise you will start consuming yourself in a sense. And it's really important because they look up to me there. I'm an instructor, and they all want to become a Marine. So everything I say, it makes impact. And of course, I started running, but something I experienced during that time, I felt really lonely. But talking about it really opened me up, and started connecting again, connecting with people I haven't met, but connecting with friends I lost, connecting with buddies, veterans. On the left, you see the small guy is my best, one of my best friends from that tour. We saved a life together. The bald guy in the back is also from that tour, and I got connected again just by being open about it and not being ashamed about it anymore. And that's of course wasn't easy, but I got better at it. And then you start a movement at some sort. Yeah? You start running, you start talking about it, and people look up to you as a form of leadership. There's somebody's doing something, and they move around it. And here, when you see your old guy, you can see him in the middle. That's Hank. He's 80 years old. Did some different tours, also a Marine, but he stands up out of his wheelchair to greet me, and because he himself suffers from PTSD and recognizes what I'm doing and feels important. And at the bottom, you can see my daughter, all grown, a little bit grown from the last from my last picture. But it's about pain and dealing with pain, and always wanted to fight the pain. That was what I thought. I knew how to fight. I knew how to fight everything. I knew how to break stuff, but I didn't know how to feel stuff. And when you walk with a heavy backpack and you do therapy, it's a sort of a metaphor how dealing with pain. And I learned to stop fighting pain and accepting it, and yeah, inviting it into my life and dealing with it. And by accepting it, it always still hurts, but it goes away at some point, and it makes room for something else, something more stronger, and you can get strength out of it. And that's I hope I get the translation right at the bottom, but that's why I started at some point. A lot of good ideas, and I'm still in active service. But one of the ideas was we call it in Holland knak. It means some sort of unbroken. But we started a platform on social media, open source, just posting videos and talking about mental health. I hope it works if I click it. And here we share videos, people sharing their stories, Marines from all sorts of places, veterans, my wife talking about mental health, talking about anxiety and stuff like that. And that really helped. And now I give lectures in military service and stuff. So yeah. Yep. And we raised a site and we did it on YouTube. So to keep it really short, that's a bit of my story, and that's what I'm doing now is doing the program, and it is and the program really works because people come to us via a social media platform that's really easy accessible. Sometimes they send a message and they just fuck, I sent a message and now I have to respond to it. So we're really on the ball, and we talk the same. The military talks. The military people talk in a certain way, and we talk the same language, and that makes it easy for us to yeah to connect and to say, hey, here's help for you. We got in the Netherlands we got an institution for it for veterans, for war veterans, um, and we say we guide them the way because it's sometimes difficult to find. And that I hope I've been really clear. My English sometimes it's a bit difficult. It's a bit Dutch, but I hope I've been clear. And yeah, that's it for me for my short presentation.
Thank you so much, Robin, for giving that insight and also that personal experience and how you conquered and how you found ways to, as you so nicely say, fight it, but become friends with it in the same time. And in addition, how you're helping others by talking about it as you're doing now, by overcoming the stigma, and which is so much needed to connect, to reach out. And I guess that once we're talking about this with the people on the call, that there will be questions directed to you. At least I hope that there will be questions directed to you. And maybe we can see, I'm calling for Irina. Irina, did you see any questions coming up? Or maybe we can open the mics for others who have a question for Robin at this time.
Дякую, Робін. Велика дуже вдячність для мене.
Thank you, Robin. I'm really grateful to you because those videos that you shared, they are extremely powerful. I think this is like a special, separate, peculiar type of therapy because through creativity, you can really share something that is hard to put into your words. Do we have other questions? Please comment. You do not necessarily have to ask a question. You might just reflect on what you have. Hi, hello. So I'm from Ukraine, from Kyiv, but currently I stay in Poland since the beginning of the full-scale war. I am a psychologist and I work with combatants and with the military who are on their rotation. So I have a question to you, Robin. How did you manage to adapt, to adjust? And what would be your advice to the Ukrainian veterans who are not coming back to the combat? How do they need to adapt and to adjust to those sounds that are all around in their everyday life, but they still remind about the war to them?
Yeah, that's a really great question because some of the sounds that have had how you call it, it had a negative experience for me. My body reacted before my mind could comprehend what happened. So I was in a standard conditioning modus, but it really felt negative. But I did my therapy, EMDR, exposure therapy, and it lessened. I still could be shaken up about it, but through therapy, the negative experience lessons, and dealing with the shame, and be ashamed about it, that I had to experience that, I had to react about it, that just went along the way when I opened up about just talking about it, but also talking to my wife about it. Last year something happened and it triggered me. I got back in that same conditioning, but instead of being silent about it, being mad about it, she asked me when we went to bed, and I just said, yeah, I talked about it more and I could express it more. And that it doesn't, sometimes we make the misconception that it has to be easy, but it's okay to be hard. Just deal with it and be real about it. And don't run away from it. Just go to it and go through it, and then when you go through it, you can experience it lessons. And if you cannot do it alone, find backup, find your buddies. So go to psychology, go do stuff like that, and take responsibility. Because when it's impacting your life in a negative sense, that's the time you have to think about, all right, this is impacting my life in this manner. I have to deal with it.
Thanks, Robin. Just a quick reminder, and actually it doesn't serve as a reminder. It's something we may also reflect. Actually, Irina and myself were talking about it over dinner this week, that you maybe in Ukraine, it is a different situation from Robin. He goes to a tour in Afghanistan and he comes home in a country where it's safe, right? There's no war in that country. Like the war is going on in his mind, perhaps, but in your situations, it may be different, right? People come home and there's still, when you turn on the news, there's another rocket attack, or there's another assault, or there's ongoing war. So how is that post-traumatic stress disorder versus ongoing stress disorder? So we can talk about that, how that would be also different from the different approaches to how you would intervene, or how you would reflect, or what we have at stake. But there's a question from now I tried to read Ukrainian. Anna Dina, help me please. Anna, I see your hand.
Так, я Ганна Дудник з
Yes, I am Hanna Dudnik. I'm from Odessa. I currently stay in Ukraine, and I'm the head of the foundation, and we are working with the mental health for Ukrainian people. And one of our track of activities is to provide support to the military and to the veterans. So we face this challenge related to family members. They have issues with the wives, with spouses, with the close family. So my question is to Robin, have you used any government-supported program? Has your family maybe sought for some kind of support, some programs for families? Of course, we have a different situation because the hostilities continue and the families are still not in the safe place, and also the members of the military coming home for the rotation, they are not safe. And what is your opinion? Do you think we need to introduce these support programs now, or shall we wait until the end of the hostilities? Or maybe we should rather focus on the therapy for the veterans who would not be coming back to the combat, or maybe we could have some encounter groups or support groups, at least online. Do you think it's going to be helpful?
Great question, Anna. Yes, great questions. Please, Robin, share your thoughts.
Yeah, of course. With the last thing you said about those groups, that those are key about sharing, just sharing your experience, and as spouses, as relations, as wives, it's really important to connect with other wives just to tell how you feel. I cannot say much about which thing you should choose because I'm not in the area and don't have the really insight to make that statement. But what I can say is during my reliability, so coming back, my wife wasn't really taken with that. So it took a lot of time for her to understand how I felt, and it's really what we think about and talk about a lot at home is that it's so important to also connect the family, to also connect the wife with the therapy, what you're going through, and of course she cannot understand what I went through. She tries to listen but cannot understand, and that's something you have to learn to deal with. But about experiencing therapy together, it really helps connecting the bond and not getting more away from each other. What often happens because you're going this direction, you're still in that direction, and it's really important to take home with it. And it maybe is not in your power or ability to help everybody at that moment, but consider just telling them about the steps that are being taken with their spouse, and in what way the program follows, and that there's some sort of place where they can talk about it and not have solutions, but just talk about it and get it out of their system.
Thank you, Robin. Any follow-up question, Anna, as you were speaking?
Так, я б хотіла ще спитати.
Yes, I also would like to ask Robin about that movement that you launched using the sports, you're running together. Do you have some sort of program that you follow? I mean, the meetings, they have some rationale behind. You have some algorithm, maybe some template. How does it go? If you have the groups, are these the long project, like 3 meetings, 10 meetings or sessions, or just a one-time event maybe that takes place like once in a month or once in a year? So what is your system, if any?
Well, it started without a system. I just started, so I just went on doing, because my own mission was, if I can help one person, then it's okay, and that's what I started. And when that worked, I did the second year. I did another event just to give it more power, and there is some sort of template, but these physical activities are part for me, a personal journey, and a part for doing something good with it. But what we see with the Unbroken program, there's a krak, what you saw on the last slide, the Unbroken, it's like an oil stain, how you call it. It just goes all directions, because it's really, we chose a word, that knak is a word that a lot of military use. And now we use it about mental health. And because we do a lot on social media, we do in September, we just plan ahead, and then we launch some videos. We also launch some magazine and stuff like that on a military basis. And it's more like a marketing campaign sometimes, but it's really personal because it's real. And we were on the background talking to veterans and stuff like that, and talking to family members and sending them to the right direction for help. So we don't really have a template that's really strict in a way, because we have to switch a lot. But it's now what you see is that people want to connect with KNAK and with the Unbroken program, because they feel the same way, and it's just people pick it up, and we just have to go to places where there are already events. But when I started at 5 Out, it just went by doing something, and that just kept on doing. And I didn't follow my program, just follow my mind and follow my heart, and just kept on doing. And now we're at a certain place where we have to make it so that more people can start this program and more people can follow it. But a lot of what we do is on social media, because it reaches everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. Just let me flag something that we've heard from your colleague in your country, Oleg Shaban, who already a couple of months ago talked about the concept of alexithymia. Sometimes there are no words to express how you may feel emotionally after coming home from the front, after coming home from the trenches. It is difficult to put into words. Maybe an opportunity, and I think Robin is the perfect example, who has put it into actions, who's put it into exercises, put it into the world record that he's been doing on walking, on running, and doing the impossible, and then fighting within himself, and thereby finding words and connecting with others about his experiences. And I see you will be experiencing that much more than we do in our clinics, this concept of alexithymia, which maybe we have forgotten because it's older concept, but it is new in the field, and I think new in the field that you will be facing. And Oleg Shaban, a couple of months ago, Irina, beautifully showed video clips on how we encounter that in the clinical practice.
I am now working in the organization called the Veteran Hub. We started working in 2018, we stopped for a bit after the full-scale invasion because a lot of our staff joined the defense force. But now we've got the new staff and we keep on working. Mostly our vector of attention was and is aimed at people who have combat experience, the veterans. So part of the veterans with whom we worked before, they are now in the defense force, they are on the military service again. And so what changed with the full-scale invasion is that the vector of our attention is reoriented onto families, as I said. So quite a lot of daily work now is aimed at working with the wives, girls who wait for the service persons. And the foundational concept for us, we did it using the US experience. Robert McDonald came to us in 2019, back when Barack Obama was the president. He was the head of the Veteran Affairs department in the US. So they had this lifelong journey concept, and they share this experience. And in Ukraine, we started developing this general map where we could look into the experience not for a specific individual, because every life is unique, and the challenges which people face at individual level are also unique. But we try to develop this map which would describe the general pathway, the general stages, which are similar for most veterans. Now, we are finalizing this concept. We try to adjust it based on the apologies. Based on the knowledge we've received, things we've noticed after the full-scale invasion, what we notice when we work with veterans who return from the current campaign. And we understand that some of the service persons who were engaged in the war from 2014, they've had some experience in the past, and they are returning. They might face new challenges, because even believing the concept of returning, when you already tried returning from the war, you started some civilian business, but now you're enlisted again. So can they really believe that a civilian life is possible ever again? When we have such a neighbor, such as Russian Federation, and there is still a possibility that even if people return to the civilian life now, in sometime in the future, maybe they would have to come back to being the service persons. So if we talk about the comparison of our experience and the experience of the international partners, indeed, now this war is happening on our soil. It's an existential war. And Robin mentioned the feeling of shame. Shame is really a very important story for the Ukrainian soldiers. But besides the stigma that strong people don't reach for support, there's another story that very often people who are wounded, they feel shame for not being at service. And this is something that creates the difficulty. It's difficult to integrate them in the civilian society because they still have the mentality of the warrior, but the body sometimes just does not enable them to take part in the war again. So what Robin said, it really resonates, and it might be even more relevant in our context, because people who fought, who protected, and they keep protecting Ukraine's independence, who make events like this possible, because it's some people at war are now fighting, and they create safe space for us where we can sit in our homes or offices and talk on this. So this is a great challenge and a complication for all of us. When we'll see more people coming back, and they are already coming back from the front line. Sometimes what we hear that, well, now we need to think to build some veteran affairs and policies, but we are late already. I don't want to be too critical, but it's our duty and it's our homework for the civilian society, for the community, to prepare the tools and the services we need for the people who are returning and those who will be returning, so that this appreciation and gratitude would not be only formal. Yes, in the media we hear that we appreciate the work of the army, but so that they, as veterans, in the practical experience, would feel this appreciation from the state. And now it still is subpar, I would say. So I really appreciate that here we have people who work in this sphere, who develop veteran affairs in Ukraine. And talking globally, meetings like this, they're very important. On the one hand, they're important because we need to see which tools, which methods are working. We need to learn this experience, and we have to share our practical experience. We might not have enough academic, but we have lots and lots of practical experience, unfortunately. So personally, I perceive this as an exchange, because we understand that a huge component of what we need to protect ourselves is international support. So we can provide to our allies some practical experience which might be helpful for them and their veterans. In some way, we would repay for the support they provide. So, in brief, this was my idea on the point. And before we started this meeting, we had a small discussion about the peer support, and I would like to mention that on the one hand, it's really important to support this peer community, the community of people who have the same experience. Our experience with the international community, international veteran community, says that, well, in terms of combat experience, it's pretty similar among the different armies, regardless of the theater of operations. Yeah, sometimes we still can't comprehend the experience in full. There's always is the uniqueness and the difference, but sometimes we don't need to understand it down to every detail to accept it. So when there was a question about the interactions of the civilians and the military in this context, the civilians, they have to accept this story that it's impossible to understand the veterans down to every details. It's never impossible. This experience they've lived through is inconceivable for the civilians, but it doesn't mean that we cannot accept it with respect, in a dignified way. Yes, in Ukraine, we have to improve lots of procedures, lots of services, but the most important thing is acceptance. Acceptance of veterans and the acceptance of the differences in the experiences. Because in this society, sometimes we see some destructive processes when we try to compare the experience of one person and the other, instead of finding what's common, what's shared. We're looking for differences, and sometimes the military do that too. Like yesterday, I talked to a friend who also is actually he's with the Marines, such as Robin, and he said, when you read the social media, these posts on Facebook, then it takes like half a day to motivate yourself to go back to fight, because like social media, they demotivate. Like, why am I there? Why am I wasting my health and my life? So it evokes lots of existential questions. And he says, why am I doing that if part of the society doesn't understand and doesn't accept me? So it's critical for us to appreciate the military service, not nominally, but to work on it, because it is work to accept, to be more open, to accept the difference, the otherness of that experience, even if it's fully inconceivable, but at least to some percentage, we can help the veterans come back and reintegrate in the society. Oh, actually, it's quite a popular mistake that I've almost made. It's not the veterans that have to integrate in the society, but the veterans are already our friends, colleagues, our parents or our children. They are simply coming back to the society from which they went to the military service. So it takes quite a lot of self-work for the civilians to integrate this new experience, the experience of war. And in different roles, we all take part in this war. And unfortunately, the Russian Federation wages the war not only against the military, but also against the civilians. So it's my subjective opinion. Sometimes I'm overly emotional and overly dramatic. It happens. But the process of integration, in my subjective opinion, is existentially important for us, because unfortunately, in the history of Ukraine, we've had cases when we had military victories over the external enemy, but we still had a lack of understanding amongst ourselves, and we lost statehood in the past. So this is a threat. Not the veterans are a threat, but the threat comes if the society cannot accept each other, if we do not face the challenges in the proper way. And we see these challenges now. So it's about the acceptance of the otherness, of the differences in experience. There will be people coming back wounded. There will be lots of people with different disabilities. And it's about the inclusivity. We must overcome these obsolete caveman approaches. Let's be honest, we are cavemen in some way, and we need to focus on inclusivity and acceptance, because this will define the Ukrainian existence in the future. Thank you. I think it's time for me to stop now.
Запостити зараз посилання на ваш сайт і запросити, хто ще.
I would like to also copy the link to your website. I'm sure everyone has seen it, this great project. I'm sorry, I wanted to add something more, because I was started talking about this veterans track, and then I went on to the philosophy, but we also introduced another track for the veterans loved ones, because this is about the women, the wives, the girlfriends who are waiting for the veterans. But if we do not take into account this agency of this category of people, then we would not be able to also introduce it into the regulatory documents, because we have this attitude in the country when the family is supposed to be the convenient tool for the integration of the veteran. It's not going to work otherwise. At some points, it's difficult to say what is more difficult, to be in the active combat or in service, or to wait for them to come back. It's, I believe, a significant, a critical aspect to consider. We are working a lot on that aspect, and also some of the recent developments. So this is the warrior's loved one track, also the parenthood during the war. This is the manual we produced, and we're going to work more on that. And also there is like the guidelines, the manual for the veterans, men and women, for about sex and intimacy for the wounded veterans. So this sexuality and intimacy topic has been tabooed in our country, but also among the military, it's even more. But when we started to openly talk about this, we were surprised to see that so many people were prepared to talk about this, to speak it out loud, because it is a very significant topic. Many people, unfortunately, because of the war, they have lost injuries, other wounds, and it's important to work on this embracing of a new body that you get, and also embracing the new body of your partner. It is a critical aspect to talk. So we have been talking about this, we have been working with it, and now we are also experiencing many changes within the organization. So we would like to shift from reflections to meeting the challenges. We need to understand the challenges of the future, because, to put it simply, I could add that what Robin mentioned before, I also agree with that, because when the veterans are returning, the first thing they need the basic support. Like, look here, chap, these are the processes that are taking place. You're not going crazy. There are people who understand how to cope with that. Others are experiencing the same thing. You're on the same minefield, but maybe you're just 2-3 steps ahead. I'm not certain about how you should live your life easier, but there's been some moments in my experience that I could share, and they might work for you. So why don't you listen? So this is what we do. This is how we move on. And I mean, I'm the only person presenting here, but there is a huge team behind, about 100 people or something. And we also have the partner organizations, and they're contributing tremendously. And I'm very happy that this activity and this focus area is developing, even though many stakeholders and many of the people who used to work with us, they now join the armed forces. I'm grateful to them. So we have Alejandri here who could confirm. So we are trying to catch up. We are trying to replace, substitute each other. We are trying to provide this continuity of our activities, because we need to have to face many challenges more.
Thank you, Artem. Thank you for speaking those words. And let me try to do a couple of things here in listening to what you just shared with us. A question that I would have actually for both Artem and Robin, since they are the experts here talking from within, is actually giving us guidance, all the mental health experts that we have here in this webinar, things that they feel the don'ts, like don't do this or don't do that. There may be some guiding principles that you have encountered along the way that did not work for you, and that you give some recommendations on, not specific psychotherapeutic techniques necessarily, but what did not do it for you, where you felt like stay away from that, or an advice that you have learned from, that we could learn from your experience on what not to do. Could you speak to that maybe first, Robin?
Yeah, of course. One of the biggest things is listening. Often when I went to therapy, I didn't feel like I was heard, because I mean, in the sense of that they listen to me. And a lot of times we think in processes. When I talk to psychologists, we think, okay, we have to do the therapy, diagnosis, we have to fill out forms. Those are all important, but the most important step is to listen first. What was the first thing the person needs? And sometimes just to vent off, just to talk about it, just to release that anxiety and let it go. And that's the first step. And sometimes that's overlooked because we just dive in the process of trying to get the diagnosis. Secondly, don't try to talk like a military or act like a military or try to put you in the shoes of someone who has been to the front lines or have been there. Don't try to do that because that really creates a barrier between and explain what you are here to bring for the person that comes to therapy. Military people just like clarity upfront. You can be direct just because that's what we're used to in the military. The directness, and I think that's when I talk to for other military also, that it's the directness of communication. And just say upfront what you're here to bring and how you can help, and that you're not the enemy and that you're not to fuck up his head, but just to help. And those are three things I think are really, really important.
Okay, Artem, may you reflect on what did not do it for you as you learned?
Ну, насправді мало, точніше, є багато.
Actually, well, there are many things I could add, but the basic things, I guess, were mentioned by Robin. Don't try to be in the shoes of somebody who you are not. I guess it's okay that you do not have that combat experience and that you are open to talk about this. Admit it. I am the person who has worked with veteran affairs without the combat experience. I can confirm that if you are trying to pretend, to act like the combatant, but when you are openly saying that I do not understand everything, but I'm doing my best, I'm trying hard to understand at least part of it, and I'm genuine about that, and I'm trying to understand for myself that for accepting and embracing the experience of another person, you do not necessarily need to understand that person, because you do not need to understand what is the direct fight. I mean, civilians wouldn't understand that. Neither do I, because I have a different experience. But nevertheless, you are still able to help and to give it a helping hand to face and cope with the challenges that they will experience. So that would be taken positively. So for the basic contact to build, you do not necessarily need to take the special training course or anything. Like, try to connect on a human level, not on the military level. We keep making jokes about that, and I will give you a spoiler because we actually want to do this, something like a series of meetings about that, because there's so many webinars, so many training sessions, how to talk to the military. So we really want to bring the military and make a workshop how to talk to the civilians who do not understand what the difference is between the armored vehicles or whatever other MLRS, who do not understand what 333 is and other things.
That's a very good example, Artem. Thank you. A training for the civilians. We have a question from Oleg. Please open your mic. Yes, go ahead.
Дякую за можливість вставити 5 копійок.
Thank you for this opportunity to bring my 2 cents. Now I am wearing the hat of a psychotherapist from the Invictus Games Ukrainian team. So it's interesting to know that before this webinar, we had another circle meeting, and we were talking about the existential things, about the change of identity in a broad sense. But that entails different changes on the corporal, on the emotional level, on the cognitive level, on other levels, social level, and what's not. And we were talking about these transitions or shifts that are taking place, that have taken place in the lives of all of those present at that meeting. And we were sharing that experience. And one of the insights or reflections from that conversation is that the experience can also be positive. The combat experience, I mean. And we are getting more of this trend that you get to not only understand the PTSD, but also this post-traumatic growth. I know that 2 days ago, Ukraine hosted a conference about that. And in that regard, I think it's important to see, for example, for employers, when they are returning their employees to their tribe, to their crowd of their company. In the first place, it's important that they see their capacity, they see their potential, because people who have experienced the adversities, as Eric said, the struggles, there's also the experience. For example, in the Indian tribes, these people were treated as the people of wisdom. Of course, after they underwent certain clearings, rituals, and they were sharing their stories, and they were enjoying much respect from the others. And I believe it's critical that we see a human being in the veteran, the human being with a huge potential, and we could help and support that identity of a warrior. We have this book already published in Ukraine, which is called The Tribe, about the Veteran Hub, and the Nash Format Publishing House published it. The mentor, the teacher of Artem and me and others who joined this peer-to-peer movement, she recommended that book to us a long time ago, and it's now available. And also by the end of the year, we are looking forward to seeing this book, Once a Warrior, Always a Warrior. And I believe that would be very important for many people to grow that potential. But that identity actually is helping you to live on in these difficult conditions, not to survive, but to keep living and to keep growing.
Thank you. So the concept of post-traumatic growth, right? Wait, maybe Artem and Robin, would you like to comment on the question? Artem, Robin, yeah, go first, Robin.
Yeah, sure. The post-traumatic growth is what I experienced also. But it's not how you call it. It takes some steps in between to come to that place and to experience that at a certain level. And a lot of things that it's not only you that can make a difference in that sense. It's your environment. It's how you what tools do you have in your toolbox to cope with emotions, to cope with speaking about your emotions. So it's not for everybody to grow completely out of it, but when your quality of life is good enough for you, then it's also a sign that you're gonna be okay. So I think post-traumatic growth, I experienced it myself. I did something with it, made me stronger. Made me stronger in the sense that now I know my vulnerabilities, and when you know your vulnerabilities, you take ownership of over your vulnerabilities, then it becomes your strength in sort of way, because nobody can touch you anymore in that sense, or you cannot be hurt in that sense, because you have ownership of it in that sort of way. So that's the thing I think about growth. But I saw you have the cap of the Invictus Games on you. So September is Düsseldorf, right? Yeah. I saw you guys last year.
Should be.
Last year in the Netherlands was really amazing.
That's also something about growth and about strength, right? The Invictus Games is a prototype on how to cope in adversity with baseball, basketball, volleyball, and you name. And we just met the Georgian team. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Eric, and this platform that we have now, like this international platform, I think it's also a growth that we can grow together. So we develop together. And Invictus Games is one of the very few platforms of interactions between veterans. And I believe that it would be very beneficial for all of us, all of our veterans of all nations, almost all nations, if we can create more and more such kind of international platforms of interacting, playing, different kind of stuff, sport, arts, music, bicycles, so it can be unlimited potential. But this idea of not get stuck in your own country with your experience. And several years ago, I did a trip in Spain, Camino de Santiago, and I met South Korean veteran who started, and I was so amazed because he doesn't look as Christian. And he told that he started his journey as veteran, but he wanna finish as civilian. And this idea of pilgrimage, so you make a whole path. And in this idea of life circle journey and some path that you have to go through, and then you will reach a specific condition. So you can change an identity. But you need to be patient and persistent.
No, thank you. We just reached out because Irina and myself were there as well. We just had a Georgian delegation of veterans visiting the Netherlands, and we learned that we have so much similarities in our veterans approach. And I think I urge also you all, you will have a veterans community, you have a veterans community, and it is so important to have that international collaboration on veterans issues, which we will need for the future. And I hope, and actually your veterans minister of the Minister of Veterans visited the Netherlands, I think it was just a couple of days ago, to explore how we can not only mental health, but there is also communication and exchange about prosthesiology. We have a lot of expertise on how to deal with prosthesis. So maybe and other countries will chime in on that as well, that we send tanks and weapons and ammunition to the Ukraine, but we also have the opportunity to help each other out for veterans in medical care. And I think that there's also a platform and an opportunity that will be growing in the future. So that is, I just wanted to flag it, and I think we'll hear more in the near future how several countries are stepping up to provide opportunities, probably within NATO or otherwise, to start building on that. But I just wanted to reach out also to Artem, who would like to reflect on the post-traumatic growth question that Oleg was asking.
Я додам виключно, щоб просто не дублювати те,
I could only add, of course, I could repeat the same things, but I agree with them. But I also want to add that this is the great process, but this is the process. And every person could only spare as much time and effort for that as they need. And we as civilians can never expect that all veterans are returning very fast and starting growing immediately. We cannot expect that. That's why we have to offer and give as much space and as much time as they need. And it might take years. And we need to realize that the veteran affairs, it's not for decades even. I mean, like the veteran status is for life. And the experience that you gain is going to stay with you forever, for life.
Thank you. And therefore, it is so important what you're doing, Artem, to create that Veterans Hub. And I think on behalf of many of us here, to applaud that effort that you created within your Veterans Hub. I think that's so important to do that now already, while the war is still ongoing, so while the conflict is not settled yet, but that's an effort. I think all of us would endorse that. But I saw a hand from Irina and the other Irina, both Irinas. Maybe Irina Radjanska first, and then our Irina. Yes, go ahead, Irina.
Thank you. Artem, I have a question to you. You've said that we need to give the veterans as much time and space as they need. But I thought, would it perhaps be detrimental to some extent because they're returning to the civilian life? And if we just give them space and we don't return them, they might not enter the civilian life. They would just, I don't know, like stay in front of the TV or something. So just giving space, it might be the easiest position. And would it really help them integrate? Because it's a different life from the military life.
Yeah, great question, Irina. To Artem first. Yeah.
Yeah, and it might seem sometimes that apathy or aggression that you manifest outside towards your environment, that people like that. But actually, they don't. Like, people don't like, you don't like being aggressive. You're angry about the environment, but after that, you're angry at yourself for being angry at your environment. So it's, you know, it's a complicated cycle, and it's difficult to break out of it. So when we talk about the reintegration into this society and the return, it's a natural process. This process will happen regardless of us talking or not talking about it. It's natural. People have adaptive capabilities. Some people have more of those, some have less. But we choose to work in this sphere to make this process easier, to facilitate it, to make it more humane, to help more people, to take this path without losses. We all who work in this sphere, we just fight for the percentage of these people. We would never be able to help 100% return, and we will have losses, unfortunately. Some people will break the law and go to jail. Some people, unfortunately, will self-harm. Some will harm others. But we are fighting for this percentage, for the change in this share, to have less non-combat losses. And the worst thing we can do is trying to fix the veterans. We have to be waiting for them, and you can't force anyone to go to support. It's not working if you force people to go to get support. What we can do is to be prepared, declaring and showing that, brothers, we're waiting, or like sisters, we're waiting for you here, come to us. And we have to be ready to greet them, not nominally, but openly, to accept them in all the manifestations. When they're angry, when they feel good, we are waiting for them. In any condition they are, in any condition they want to come to us, we'll accept them. And it's easy to say, but it's difficult to do. So I'm talking not about the veteran service organizations, but about the society overall. We are now showing lots of respect to the army. And starting 2014, we've learned to talk about the war, but we have to learn to talk about the return, about being a veteran, because nobody explains what being a veteran means. When you start the service, you have at least some explanation. You have the boot camp, but nobody gives you a veteran boot camp. It's an ongoing search for everyone. And we can only be helpful. We can be a helpful island for the people who are in this search. So understanding all possible risks. Well, you can't force anyone to go to you for support. I would like to add, if you may, Artem, in the chat there was a question, and oh, I'm sorry for the noise in the background. There was a question like, what motivates the veterans to go to help? What drives them? So I would like to note your experience. When you've offered legal support, you've offered employment support to the veterans, and in parallel, you were providing also access to psychological care and this multidisciplinary referral. So you create trust to the organization and also its peer organization. So then the veterans, they recommend the organization to others. And I also heard that you work with I heard from the colleagues who work in physical rehabilitation that it's a good entry point. Physical therapists, they are a great place to refer to a mental health specialist. It's time for us to conclude this, and we've looked at the statistics and saw that the topics dedicated to the military is that the number of people registered equals the number of people who are attending. So today, I think 90% of those who registered are here. In other topics, we might have lots of people registered, but like 35% are coming. But here we see that people were coming, they wanted to hear this, and here they are, and I appreciate people who came to discuss and to create this space.
And when we're dealing with the news about what we're hearing this week from the Wagner Group, and what do we believe that is brought to the media every day over and over? What is the narrative that we're facing with, and how is that affecting us every time we hear a narrative? Is it true or not true, or how much are we listening into that is right or wrong? I have difficulties to struggle with that, and that was a question actually that I would like to pose, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, to Robin and Artem. How do you deal with the daily news? Now, you've been out, Robin, but you hear about Ukraine, and you hear about the Wagner Group, and you hear about Moscow and the threats, and then all of that stuff, I would say. Do you throw your remote control to the TV screen, or do you still keep it in your hands? How do you cope with these news items on the war?
It's difficult because it's not difficult because there are people in the trenches that are fighting, so that's difficult. What we are experiencing is not even in comparison to that. But what it brings forth to me is when people are fighting for freedom and they're fighting against an enemy, you want to join the fight. That's what you want. That's how it feels. But I don't try to look at the news a lot. I try to zoom in from now and then, because when I do it a lot, it makes me feel I can't do anything. So it doesn't help me in that sense. But I don't look away from it, because I think you should look at what happens and not look away. And it's finding the balance, because also my PTSD could be triggered by it a lot, because when I just keep on scrolling and not releasing all those endorphins and stuff that comes with it. So that's a bit of a thing. But always when I see those images, you just want to go there and fight. And that's, I think, your warrior mindset is yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Artem, how is that for you? Maybe your last comment before we wrap it up.
Почну з того, що я намагаюсь теж...
Firstly, I also try, well, as much as possible, to, well, at least to stay off social media and to kind of read more factual news from responsible media, I would say. And it might be like too much of a saying, but I kind of believe that on the one hand, I have this daily shame that I'm not in the front line, that I'm not fighting with the others, but I can do something for these people who are now making the news. They create historic events and they pay with their life, with their health for this. And I might get triggered, I might like things, I might not like other things, I might want to see more good news from the front, but the only way to ensure we have good news from the front is to be there at the front line, to create this good news. So when I read the news, I always appreciate that there are people enabling me reading the news in Ukrainian, in English, reading truthful news. It all is supported by those people who are now fighting, who are enabling us. So this is the philosophical foundation, and it's a war of different philosophies. It's not just the war of Ukraine, it's the war of philosophies, and I appreciate them supporting my philosophy.
Oh, thank you for flagging that. That's very wisely said. I appreciate that, Artem. Yeah. So yeah, Orest, I see some applause in that response. It is the bottom of the hour. We've gone over the bottom of the hour, Irina. Another wonderful webinar that we've been able to hold. Thank you all for participating.